right, so first episode. We've been talking about doing this for what now? Probably 5 years.
At least.
At least 5 years. I'm Dan, and this is my brother Sam, and we're attempting to start a podcast here. So this will be an intro. We won't go very long here. The goal here today is just to introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about what we're interested in, about what our goals are for this forum, and we'll just see where it goes. So I'm Dan.
I'm Sam.
Ponjikin. And we are brothers, clearly, if you can't tell. But the goal here is to capture conversations that Sam and I have had for the better part of our lives. I'm 45 years old. My brother is so much older than me.
48, man.
Ancient.
Fresh.
Freshly into our second half of our life, hopefully. But it's ever since, we were just talking before the podcast, and ever since we were kids, we grew up both in New Jersey. We're both obviously brothers. We're sons of immigrants. We grew up in the northern part of New Jersey to parents who were, as you say, fresh off the boat from Eastern Europe, from the former Yugoslavia. And, we'll get into a lot more of our background, but, for the purposes of this introduction, we've always been very close and always enjoyed having deep, interesting conversations. And as we got older and wisdom has come with age, our conversations seem to be more interesting to other people. And I always look forward and love talking to my brother when we have time. So we figured, why not? The technology is easier these days. Podcasting is more approachable than it ever has been. So why not start recording?
Such a low barrier to entry. You can just blame podcasts that this content's out there.
Well, and it's one of my favorite ways to consume information. Sam's definitely the studious one of the two of us. He reads way more than me, but I probably consume. I can say I'm ashamed about how much audio and video content I consume. I consume a lot, and it's just the way I learn. I really enjoy it.
Hey, there's no reason to be ashamed about it. Honestly, the oral tradition predates, the written word. So, learned people from old, what did they do? They talked to each other and they listened to each other in various forms. So, hey, it's the original.
It's a great point. Yeah, I remember I did a training one time for work, and they talked about the various, I don't remember if it was three. I want to say it's three main ways people learn. And, there's so many different areas that authors and scholars have tried to break down human characteristics, like the 5 love languages, the most infamous one. And, that's been helpful to me in my marriage. I don't know about you, but this training that I did, it was how people learn and recognizing how you learn. And there was some self-assessment we did, and I was like really high on visual and audio learning. That was a huge one for me.
And believe it or not, as much as I read, my my preference is always to learn through dialogue. I love, talking to somebody who read a book, watched the documentary, and, being able to have that back and forth dialogue. And so, honestly, podcasts are sort of like that. You don't get to ask questions in the end, but you get to choose your content, and so listening to this, obviously it's a popular media, and so it's kind of fun to be participating in it.
Well, dialogue is neat because you get to work out your ideas. And, I'll say that about myself, hopefully, we keep this going and an audience gets to know us a little bit and join in on our interesting conversations. But, my ideas definitely are not always flushed out.
Yeah.
So you'll quickly find that out about me, certainly. And dialogue helps that. So, I think that will become widely evident. So one of the things you touched on, and I want to kind of put that out here for our first episode here is, so what is our interest? What's the target topics for this podcast? I think we'll have a pretty broad audience, but a couple people asked me, I'd been promising to start one for a while now. And I was just talking to somebody this week, actually, and he said, well, what's the theme? What's the focus that you guys want to hit? And the best thing I can think of is kind of an intersection between faith and theology, between science. And so that kind of leads into, I'll tell you just a short, I won't bore everybody, but a little bit about who I am and my background. So I've been in the ministry in various Pentecostal faiths and churches for the better part of the past 25 years, and always been volunteer. I've held a lot of different roles and titles. I served some time internationally as a missionary and youth ministry when I was younger, and kind of administrative roles, and even pulpit ministry. But all alongside of that, both Sam and I, and he'll expound a little bit on his past, but we're both engineers by education, and I was only an engineer for a little while. I found out I wasn't smart enough, but I quickly kind of moved to the IT side. But nonetheless, I've got a science and technology. It has always been a big part of who I am in my secular career, if you will. So I'm very interested in science, and that definitely fills a large part of my thinking bandwidth, if you will, and of course spirituality. So it seems like when Sam and I get together, that tends to be where the conversation goes, kind of the intersection between science and theology.
No doubt. Yeah, both engineers for sure. I mean, science is going to permeate. I mean, and what is science? Science, it's a study of knowledge, and it's a method. And I think, we apply that method in everything, even in our lives, in our faith. And what that means is that there's some accountability too. In science there is accountability. A lone scientist doesn't have much value, but a scientist that has been peer reviewed and is accountable to peers has tremendous value. And so I think, that's a big part of our faith as well. I think I could speak for Dan on that front as well. I want to, like Dan said, some of these thoughts are kind of raw and unfiltered, and I'm quick to admit if I haven't fleshed something out really, but I think that's discipleship. That's kind of the process of sanctification, is this constant transformation and renewing of our minds, right? That transform us. So yeah, I think it's part of who we are. This idea, this method of how we think and learn. It's obviously been a huge part of our careers, and permeates every part of who we are, what we do.
It's interesting you say that. The scientific method. Here we are in 2022, hopefully at the tail end of the pandemic, where everybody was a scientist and they understood everything about biology and virology.
Yeah.
I'm being facetious, of course, but it brings up a great point that the Bible does say to work out salvation, and it does talk in several contexts about interacting and having accountability amongst peers. And that's so lacking these days. I think we were talking earlier today, actually, and how our Western culture, certainly, in the United States and the church in that sense too, has become so authoritative and authoritarian, and really built this culture of don't question, don't have dialogue. And I know many church leaders and theologians would probably disagree with that, but inherently, I think it ends up being built into the culture. And I can honestly say, and I think you would agree, that there is a huge lack of dialogue amongst
absolutely
people in general. And I can even put that outside of the church. There's just not enough dialogue. There's more people trying to convince each other that they're right and they're firmly established in this, this doctrine, whether it's a scientific stance or a theological stance. But I think the world, it needs more dialogue,
especially with people who think differently than you. Our inclination is to, hole up in some silo of thought, surround ourselves with people who pretty much agree with us, and very, very seldom, sit down with people who really disagree with us. We tend to avoid that. It's much more comfortable to sit with, people that are just like you. And I've just had so many rewarding conversations with people who think very, very differently from me. And I've learned over the years how to, approach it with curiosity and kindness. And I mean, I think an approach that Jesus often modeled for us. So it's tremendously rewarding. And so hopefully, everybody listening to this conversation would also be encouraged to reach out, and if you hear something here that you don't entirely agree with, keep listening, and we're not right about everything here. we're we're seeking understanding. And I think dialogue, again, is one of my favorite ways to gain understanding. It's just to kind of talk it out with people, ask questions, legitimately show curiosity.
So that brings up something I was thinking about a little while back. Why isn't there dialogue? Why do people not question? In the sphere of politics, in the sphere of science, in the sphere of religion and faith, I think it's easy to kind of use a crutch and saying, oh, it's forbidden. We're in the Middle Ages Spain, and questioning the social elite and the political elite and the religious elite is just forbidden. And I think most there's always exceptions, but in most cases that's not true. But I do think it comes down to fear. People are more afraid than ever to step out and to question things for a couple of reasons. Number one is the optics of how they look if they ask, say something stupid.
Yeah.
Or number two, for the somewhat, potentially maybe a passive aggressive retaliation or whatever, some sort of retaliatory, remark or even actions. I think, in the end, a lot of people are afraid to initiate dialogue, especially when it's dissenting, for a lot of reasons. And, I think good people, and I'd like to be counted as one of those, need to work on breaking that fear down amongst people and trying to
Absolutely.
be approachable and make sure that it's okay to ask questions, even if that question might offend you and be shocking to you. If
Sure.
somebody comes to you and says something, we can't, through our body language and our reaction, I think in this day and age, we need people to accept and talk about things rather than, retaliate or create a wall so that dialogue is stifled.
Yeah. And I mean, one way you can do that is by always prioritizing relationship over rightness. If I'm in a conversation with somebody and it gets into something a little contentious, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to ask. I'm going to state my perspective. And, honestly, if it starts to get really unfriendly, I'll just pause and be like, listen, I love you too much to keep this conversation going. So my relationship with you is way more important than this. So how about sports or something like that? I don't know. I'm not really good at talking about anything. Maybe find some innocuous subject to talk about that preserves the relationship. There's nothing more important than that. We've got to maintain that and learn how to do that, how to disagree kindly.
I was just texting somebody today who's going through transformation, a pretty drastic change in his life with his community. And, he was just starting to get vulnerable with me and, revealed some details of his concerns with the relationships that have seemingly broken apart. And anyways, without getting into too many details, he mentioned that he dropped a little hint, a little tidbit that 17 years ago, these feelings and questions started. And he at least alluded to, and I didn't really get all the details, but he alluded to that potentially he did say something around his concerns. And, he shared a snarky remark that was shared back and how he was shut down. And, now him and his family have made a change and, hopefully for the better. But, he shared with me, the damage, the psychological and spiritual damage that occurred from 17 years. I mean, think
Wow.
about that. That's a chunk of life right there. And, this individual, he's got 2 kids and, the pain and suffering that they now have to deal with. That's unfortunate. And I say that with personal experience because I've definitely been in situations where I've experienced that maybe not at a, dramatic, life-changing, painful, trauma, but I've definitely been in situations where, it was made clear that my voice was not accepted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that stings, even years later, I can think of, without even thinking too hard, at least 2 or 3, 4 moments right now where, just kind of shut down. And as soon as I feel that, and I think a lot of people would agree that you tend to just back off, and you feel like, okay, that's not welcome here. I'm not going to, some people really will work hard to insert themselves and assert themselves, but I just kind of back off and say, okay. And then that's that. And, it stings even years later.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of probably our personalities. We're brothers, so we probably share that personality trait. There's some people that will fight to the death, and maybe not for the best, but
No.
it's definitely not my nature to assert myself in that way. And a little bit that is intentional. I'm trying to be, I'm trying to, be meek, because that is what we're called to be. But
And make room. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Another way I think that people are uncomfortable, disagreeing with one another is there's tension in uncertainty. You mentioned the COVID pandemic. Anytime there's uncertainty in information, people are very uncomfortable in that tension. Being scientists, I understand how emerging information, there's a lot of uncertainty, and then you increase the fidelity of the data and, reduce uncertainty as time passes. So you kind of get used to it, but I acknowledge that there's many ways where, whenever there's tension and uncertainty, it's very uncomfortable. We love certainty. We just love, concrete, simple black and white answers. But you're not doing anybody any favors. If somebody comes up to you with, serious concerns or questions, doubts, whatever it is, to come back with just a concrete answer, it's a Q&A session. Somebody has a question, I've got your answer. I heard it said once that their preferred response is a question and response, not a question and answer. Everybody can only just respond to a question. Who can say with any certainty that they have the answer? So I think it takes some humility to understand in these types of dialogues and conversations that you're responding to one another, you're sharing your perspective, and if somebody shares a perspective you disagree with, it's a good habit to just thank them for sharing their perspective. Thank you for sharing your perspective. I don't really agree with it, but I really appreciate hearing it.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that said, we kind of talked, very briefly about, the fact that we're brothers, we're very close. We're kind of both middle-aged, and we both, grew up with a mom and dad, a dad that was a pastor, a grandfather that was a pastor, very traditional, traditional Christian values, but probably a little bit different than a typical Western Christian, upbringing, because our parents were immigrants. But with that said, here we are, middle age, and Sam and I differ in quite a bit of our beliefs. As you'll see in our conversations, maybe not today, but in upcoming conversations when we're more focused and themed, we'll certainly disagree on quite a few things. And man, that's great. That's what I think that's what makes our conversations more enriching. And, dare I say, here in the last 5 years, so much has changed. The pace of change, not just in technology, but the world, how fast, the world is changing. Here, we're in March of 2022, and Europe's on the brink of war. And, just a month ago, we would have never thought that would have happened. And then, of course, COVID, and we're working from home now, both of us, and, families, and so much has changed. Yet, I guess what my point I'm trying to make is I've had to learn how to really enjoy and find beauty in that diversity. Really, we use this a lot at, in professional sense, in the workplace, but the diversity of thought, kind of resisted that probably for the better part of my life. Always sought to find people that are like me to surround myself with. But I've really here, maybe in the last year or two, have learned to appreciate that. And, the diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, how enriching that could be. And, the biggest part, probably the final frontier for me on that, has been in my spirituality. I didn't always do that. Probably for the better part of my life, I certainly have not done that, and surrounding myself with diversity of opinion and diversity of thought in my faith. And, not that I'm going to go start hanging out with a bunch of Buddhists in a hill somewhere, but although that'd be cool for a day or two. But I have learned to appreciate a diversity of thought, and really specifically in all areas of life, but specifically in my faith.
Absolutely. It's been tremendously rewarding for me. Anyone that's shared their spirituality and faith, I'm always enriched, and it's just drawn me even closer and deeper into a relationship with Jesus. So I think it's awesome. I think we all would benefit much more from again, not surrounding ourselves with people who think exactly like us, but who think differently, and ask them, show genuine curiosity for, their faith, their ideas, their beliefs, and, have those conversations. It's tremendously enriching.
Absolutely. So I think we'll probably wrap up for today. Like I said, this is supposed to be just an intro. I think you get a feeling for a little bit of how how our conversations are going to go. But I think we'll try to do this at a regular interval. No commitments yet, but open to everybody's feedback. If you do stumble across this first episode that we're probably not going to promote because it's going to be pretty rough, we do solicit your feedback. Hopefully we're going to improve both the appearance and technology and the sound and everything here. But we're trying to hone in on the time and how much time we spend on these episodes, and we'll figure that out as we go. But so again, this is primarily going to be myself and my brother Sam. Probably occasionally have some guests that will join us. Interesting people that the two of us will enjoy talking to. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts?
Yeah, it's exciting to kind of get this started finally. We've been talking about it for a long, long time, and finally just turn on the microphone and record it, and then see where it lands.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to doing more of these. And again, if you come across these, let us know your thoughts. Leave a comment and help us shape what might be interesting. And if you have something negative, say, then just keep your mouth shut.
Exactly.
Kidding a little bit. All feedback is open.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will talk to you tomorrow, Sam. And for those listening, thanks for